So the next set of plots that we're going to look at for symptomology are ALS inhibitors. These are typically characterized by red veins. That's normally the number one thing that people associate with ALS inhibitors when we have crop injury or crop response from this class of herbicides. But what you will notice here in our soybeans is that we've got a range of the severity of the symptomology or crop injury that we see here. What this plot actually is permit or halosulfuron. And so what you're noticing in differences here are three different ALS tolerant or resistant varieties, right? So the soybeans that are more severely injured have no ALS resistance to them whatsoever. In these two rows right here, we have the Bolt technology, and in the two rows back there that look healthy are our STS technology. So you can see when we have that ALS tolerance, whether it's STS or Bolt, it provides that tolerance or resistance level to survive a shot from the herbicide permit, and they actually look very healthy. As opposed to those that don't have that tolerance, you see some very severe injury. They get stunted quite a bit. We stack those nodes on top of one another. We also get those red veins and yellowing, and then also some of those leaves turn a very, very dark green color. It just looks real dark when they get to a severe injury level. So you can see that on the soybean front. Also with the cotton behind me, typically we may see a little bit of symptomology of slight yellowing on that from a drift rate of permit, but a lot of times we just don't have those calls come in. We don't see that drift happen a lot. And in the symptomology behind me, we just didn't really get that to occur. So there's really not a lot of injury that we see on the cotton front. So really in this plot in general, the most severe injury that we see comes in on these soybeans. Even at a reduced rate of permit, you can see how severe that can hurt these non-tolerant or non-resistant soybean varieties. So here we can see where we're zoomed in on some of this typical ALS inhibitor symptomology. Once again, this was permit or halosulfuron on non-tolerant soybeans. And you can see that clear red-purple vein that begins to show up on the underside of our soybean leaves when we get this symptomology. So along with those red veins or purple veins that we can see, we also see just the discoloration of these soybean plants from this drift. So some leaves will get this light chlorosis yellow color, while some of the older leaves will turn this real dark, deep green color along with the stunting and those red veins. So all of those symptoms combined are very distinctive of ALS inhibitor chemistries. Here you can see the difference between the Bolt technology on the left, the two healthy rows of looking soybeans, versus the two non-resistant rows of soybean here to the right. And this is a very clear difference at how this Bolt technology provides resistance to a herbicide such as halosulfuron. With Bolt technology versus STS technology, we have two traits conferring resistance, whereas on the STS side, we just have one trait conferring resistance. So Bolt provides even more resistance risk management there versus the STS beans as well. But you can see with our Bolt technology, we are able to spray permit at reduced rates, and even a full rate of permit it's able to withstand over the top of that Bolt technology. In this plot here, we're looking at a different ALS inhibitor chemistry. This happens to be Regiment or bispirabax sodium. In this plot here, you can see much more severe injury on our soybean as well as our cotton in the background there. Regiment is a very hard herbicide, even at a low drift rate like we used in this plot, on our soybeans and on our cotton. Symptomology it tends to be the same as we looked at with our halosulfuron or permit plot. We see, stacked nodes, red or purple veins, yellow color at the top in the new growth, and then some of that old growth turns a very dark green. So some of that similar symptomology, but it's just much more difficult or much more hard on those different plants. Here in the soybeans, what you can see is basically all of our varieties are completely dead from this low rate of Regiment, except these two rows right next to me here, which happen to be that Bolt technology, which has two traits to confer resistance. But even with that Bolt technology, they're still showing some pretty good injury from that low rate of Regiment. So although that Bolt technology confers a higher level of resistance, it's still not perfect when it gets hit with a shot of Regiment, in a low shot of Regiment at that. If you look towards the back, not the back two rows, but the second to last two rows, the third and fourth row, happen to be our STS soybeans. And those have a one trait resistance to confer resistance to ALS inhibitors, but you can see that one trait was not able to hold up to this low shot of Regiment, and they're completely dead. So STS beans will be severely compromised by a shot of Regiment. Non-resistant soybeans will be very hurt by a shot of Regiment, and bolts will be injured but may not be killed. So you can see the difference there across our soybeans. When we look back at the cotton, we see a lot of similar symptomology to what we just talked about. Yellowing at the top of the meristem, some stunting of those nodes at the top, and then some crinkling, bubbling of those leaves. Basically, you can just see where the ALS inhibitors are stopping growth or messing with the growth of the plant. Even on those cotton plants at this low rate of Regiment, we're going to see some, either if not plant death, it's going to severely impact those plants all the way through harvest, and we'll see some definite yield loss out of this low rate of Regiment. Here we can see just how much more injurious Regiment is to our soybeans than Permit was in the plot that we looked at just previous to this one. Regiment, or bis-pyrrhubac sodium, is much harder on our soybean plants than pretty much any of the other ALSs. On the left two rows there, those are our Bolt technology beans again, and then the right two soybean rows here are non-resistant to ALS chemistries soybean varieties. And you can see just basically how dead the two non-resistant rows are because of a low rate of Regiment. Again, this was a low simulated drift rate, and it's basically killed those two rows of beans completely. And even on our Bolt technology, which has those two genes to confer resistance, there's still a significant amount of injury showing up on those beans as well. So Bolt technology, it does help, but it is not a perfect lifesaver for something like Regiment, even at a lower rate that may have drifted onto our beans. Also in this frame, the far two right rows of soybeans that you can see in the corner of the frame are our STS beans, those beans that had a single trait to confer resistance to ALS inhibitors. And you can see there that even though those are STS beans, with a low rate of Regiment, it completely killed those beans as well. So that STS gene is not able to confer resistance to something like Regiment, whereas our Bolt beans with the two gene trait resistance is able to confer at least a little bit of resistance to a low rate of Regiment. Similar to our soybeans, cotton is very sensitive to Regiment as well, much more sensitive to Regiment than our Permit or halosulfuron that we looked at earlier. What we can see for symptomology on our cotton here at this low rate of Regiment is a lot of yellowing in the upper leaves and upper terminals, as well as the stacked nodes at the top there. And there's also some bubbling or crinkling to the leaves. Really, it just has stunted growth and stopped growth of these cotton plants and caused some very severe injury to this. The cotton here is going to be severely set back if it's not completely killed. Even with this low rate of Regiment, it definitely will have some lasting impacts all the way throughout to the end of the season. So Regiment, once again, we saw how hard it is on soybeans. A drift rate is also very hard on cotton. Well, thanks for watching, everybody, today. We just quickly wanted to kind of summarize a few things and kind of hit on another couple topics. So to kind of finalize everything, we looked at several different groups of herbicides today. So the bleachers, the burners, and then our twister turners, or our growth regulator type ones. And then as well as some other systemic type herbicides that we can see move through the plant, causing other symptomology as far as damaging growth, right, or stopping growth. And so what we really wanted to hit on there was, once again, if you get called out to a field to look at plant symptomology, potential drift cases, those kinds of things, some of the first things you want to do is look for symptomology. What kind of injury do you actually see that's happening? Selectivity, look around. Are there grass weeds dying? Are there broadleaf weeds dying? Is it a broadleaf crop affected? Is it a grass crop affected? That kind of thing. Selectivity can help us narrow down to those different groups of herbicides. And then finally, look at our surroundings and look at ditch banks, look at surrounding trees, look at other surrounding things around the field that can really help us, again, narrow down to some of those different classes of herbicides. Because if we can get down to a class of herbicide, it makes it a lot easier and it limits our options as to what the overall active ingredient that may have hit that field actually is. So take the time and look at some of those other surrounding things to help yourself out in an instance like this if you get called out to a field. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom for some final comments.
All right. Well, that's some good info, and we appreciate everybody joining us or watching this video. Obviously, we're not able to do this kind of thing without the support of our program associates and crew throughout the summer. In this particular case, Tommy's crew, Troy Dillon, Ashley McCormick, several hourlies put a lot of time in with these plots to enable us to show them to you today. We also want to thank our industry support throughout the state, as well as our commodity group support. A lot of the things that we do like this wouldn't be possible without that support, and so we just want to thank you. Thank you for joining us, and tune in for more to come in the future.